So let's talk about loading avatars with threads at first. So you'll remember last week we talked about um, leaving a little bit of space. Actually, we put the component in the view. So the component was in the view last week, an image view that would allow us to show avatars, but we weren't loading the avatars yet. But this week we're going to actually go through and load the avatar. Each time a tweet is put into a list item here in the list, we're going to show we're going to start loading the avatar at that point. Um, but loading an image is one of those network operations, especially from the network. It's one of those operations that is long running. It's not trivial. It can't be completed on the UI thread, or things will get really choppy. So, like we talked about last week, those kinds of things needs to be offloaded onto a, a background job. So what we're going to do, just to kind of first show that we need to, at least to make the application usable, we need to load these avatars in the background. We're going to set the scene for the next step where we talk about the async task, and we'll load these with a handler and a thread like we loaded the new tweets or old tweets last week, and then we'll see where that leaves us. So let's go into the code and get that going. What we're going to look at is, if you'll remember the way things are kind of set up, each one of those items in the list inside the list that shows all the tweets, each one of these items is a status list item, which is selected here. The layout is in resources, layout, status list item.xml. We'll have a look at that code really quickly. It's a custom view component. That means it, besides the XML definition, which lays out the image view for the avatar, the text view for the username, and the text view for the status, or the content of the tweet, it is a status list item. So that means when this is constructed or inflated from the XML, one of these classes will be created to control the view. So let me open up that guy and we'll look at what it is. First of all, if you remember, it's a relative layout, and we have references to the avatar view, the screen name, and the status text. And we're added now on line 20 a handler to deal with loading the avatar in the background. So let's go through how this is going to work. When the status is set, that means the tweet is loaded into the list item for viewing. The first thing we're going to do is get the user off of the status that was set in there. And I didn't change this code from last week. Someone else pointed out that I shouldn't be finding views each time the status is set. So just ignore that for right now. I'll try to fix that for later and upload that code. But after we find the views and we set the new tweet, we're going to set the screen name text, and we're just going to set the status text. But then we're also going to start to load the avatar this time around. So the first thing we want to do is set the image drawable to null. In this case, so the worst thing that could happen is when we set a new tweet, as we're scrolling around in here, we don't want to show someone else's avatar on this tweet. So the first thing we need to do is get rid of the old avatar that was there. Because remember, each one of these views, as we scroll through the list, is actually getting recycled. So there's only actually maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or so status items, and each time we scroll, the ones that are going off the top are getting recycled and put in to new views on the bottom. So every time each one of those gets recycled, set status is going to get called, and we need to clean out the old avatar so we're not showing the wrong avatar on a tweet that just got loaded. So that's the first step. We show a blank avatar, and if we had a more like in-depth graphical idea behind this application, we'd probably have like a default avatar or something to show, just so it didn't look so weird as we scroll around showing nothing. But for this application, it's good enough to just clean that out and show nothing. And then what we want to do is, just like we did last week here, we need to create a new thread to load the avatar in the background. And it turns out it's not that hard to load even an image from the network. and create what's called a drawable, which we're going to be talking about a lot more next week. Basically, a drawable is something that can be drawn. And to create a drawable, which is something that we can put into an image view, just like we have here on line 5 of the status list item XML, which shows the avatar. All we need to do is do this convenience method drawable create from stream, and then get the URL from the profile image on the Twitter4J user, and then say open stream. And then there's this this kind of key that we can use to, in case you're loading a bunch of drawables, I think this is a key that you can use to remember which one that's getting loaded at the time. I'm not really sure what it's used for, but we don't need to use it. It just needs to be there when you say create from stream. So I'm creating that drawable from a stream from a Java IO class that knows how to load some information off the internet. And then when that's done, we'll have something called avatar drawable, which will be set, and we're holding a reference to that here on line 24. And then catching any exceptions that happen, we can say handler.post finished loading drawable. So can anybody remember what type of a thing this is? How the handler works with the post? You can see down here that this is a, if I hit F3, this is a runnable. Actually, it's up here. Sorry, on line 26. A runnable is just something that implements a run method. So this handler, again from last week, remember that the handler is the guy that can communicate between the activity and the thread. So we have to post a runnable through there, and then the runnable is the one that can actually manipulate the activity, because you can't do that from the thread. Like we can do simple things like this, like set the value of this drawable, like on line 24. We can set the avatar drawable's value. We can set a reference to something from a thread, but we can't do any manipulation of the activity or of the view from the thread. So the handler is the one that does that. That's why we have to do this intermediate step of creating a drawable, and then the handler will tell the handler to post this runnable, and then whenever it gets around to updating back to the main thread, the runnable on line 26, or the one defined on line 26, will be run. And that just calls another method called finish loading user avatar, which is on line 28. So if I hit F3 on that, we'll go down and you'll see what actually happens once the runnable runs, which is just to set that drawable into the avatar view. So let me make that even more clear in case it's not. The avatar view, we couldn't have done this avatar view set image drawable from the thread, because that would be manipulation of the something that's on the view hierarchy. We can simply set the drawable that is a instance variable of the activity to some new reference. We can do that, but since it's not in the view hierarchy, we don't get any problems there. But if you would have tried to do what we do on line 59 instead of the thread, then you would get an error, which is why this handler has to act as the go-between. So now that we have the reference to the drawable set on the activity, then the activity, the handler will post this new runnable when the thread is done, and then this code will be called, and then the view hierarchy can be changed to show the new avatar. And that's what's happening through this code, and you can already see it working here as we scroll. New avatars are loaded, and it takes a little bit of time. Now, I don't know if this is really coming across to you over the wire, but this is really chunky. So you can see my mouse scrolling up here, and then it takes like 3 seconds for it to actually react and load the new avatars. It's almost as bad as if we were loading these avatars on the UI thread. It's really not that much of a benefit. Oops, didn't mean to do that. It's not really that much of a benefit to the user experience to be loading these things on a thread. Like it's just like one step forward. So we've done the right thing by taking the avatar load into the the background and off the UI thread. But in summary, using that many threads, because we're trying to load at least 5 and maybe more depending how fast the user is scrolling, but using that many threads can cause almost as trouble as using no threads at all. So that's pretty much what we've got for this first step, and we're going to see how to fix that next. But does anybody have any questions about what we've done so far?
I actually have a question, and then I'm going to hand it over to the audience. So even if you're using the same icon for a bunch of the tweets, you're still loading it separately each time, correct? So you're loading the Creative Live icon multiple times, even though it's the same one.
Yep, and that's a good point. I didn't mention that. This is really sort of dumb, simple code. We would be using some more like in-memory and maybe even on-disk caching or something like that in a real production application, where we would see if we already had the image loaded and then load that out of a cache or something smart there, instead of trying to load them each off the internet, both time or every time it's loaded, which is kind of dumb.
Okay.
But it's good enough for the purposes of this class.
And we have a question from Mitchell, who asks why the avatar drawable variable is protected.
As opposed to public or as opposed to private?
Well, the other ones are private, so.
Yeah, so I think. I'm sorry. That should have been immediately obvious to me. The reason it's protected is because the thread is needs to access it. This thread is a different class.
Yep, makes sense. Brian has a question from the chat room.
TPS asked, are you going to do some caching?
No, that's not really Android specific. I mean, maybe disk caching could be, but there's a whole lot of content in here, and no, I didn't deal with any caching in this application.
Tony, I personally have a question, kind of in coordination to this. How about caching the images? I know TweetDroid stores all the icons that it currently has already loaded from the load stream into a protected folder on my machine.
Yeah, like I was saying, the right way to do this would be, instead of just creating this from a stream, would be to pass off, it would be to delegate to some sort of cache manager object or something like that. And the cache manager would check some sort of in-memory cache, probably first, because that would be the fastest. And if it wasn't in that cache, then it could check a disk cache or something like you're talking about, which would persist through sessions. And if you restarted the application or restarted your phone or something, and then if it wasn't there, then it would load it from the internet, and then the cache manager would know where to put that, instead of so it would be responsible for also populating the cache. But again, the point of what we're talking about right now is just moving this long-running task off to a thread.